All right, everybody. I have the coolest privilege to introduce the coolest guy of all time. Isn't he cool? Like he is awesome. He's just his essence is awesome. So Andy Connelly, everybody, we're going to be hosting him this evening. Andy is an educator at the Kansas Geological Survey. He received his undergrad and master's in geology at the University of Kansas. He has dedicated his career in education, working at national parks and museums across the US. I love this. His favorite topic to teach is fossils. And my very, very favorite thing about Andy is his, like, no one knows about him, is he plays the accordion on the side. So you're already this cool, and then it like went way up. So he's going to be sharing about the High Plains Aquifer. I know we have a lot of interest around this topic. So we're really excited to be able to record this and share this. So Andy, thank you for your expertise and your time, and we'll turn it over to you.
Wait, before we do that, we have a quick poll for you, just to get you going and thinking. So here you go. Only two of you. Okay.
Oh, I like that. I like the interactive.
Well, oh, there we go. All right.
It's asking me to scan a QR code to answer. Did it do that for anyone else?
Yep, same here.
Not fast enough, so that's why I haven't voted yet.
That's not cool. All right. We will go ahead and let Andy get started, but I was curious to know if you knew where your water came from. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right, yeah, I'll just get going then while this is happening here in the background then. Yeah, my name is Andy Connelly. Thank you for that introduction. I am an educator at the Kansas Geological Survey. I know like we have some people here. Feel free to ask questions at any time. Feel free to ask any clarifications. I'm an educator. I've talked to so many people before, from little kids, teenagers, the adults, publics, retirees, whoever. So feel free to ask questions in the chat here. But I have my first question to you all, and that is if anyone has ever heard of the Kansas Geological Survey before. This is usually something I like to introduce my my own workplace before I go into the topic. So you can just do a quick yes or no on the chat. All right. See some thumbs up, see some yes. Got 2 yeses already. Got a nice cat from over on Rachel's side as well. I love it. Cool. Excellent. Nice. All right. So here's the thing. Yes, but do not really know what you do. Oh, that's perfect. So here's the thing, is that we are a state division. We are underneath both the University of Kansas and the state of Kansas. So basically, geologists, we study the earth, anything, rocks, fossils, aquifers, earthquakes, rivers, things like that. But in this case, we study everything in the parameters of Kansas itself. So when we think of a geologist, think of us, but we just focus on the state. As far as I'm concerned, everything outside of our borders is a void. I know so much about our own state, but as soon as someone asks me about Missouri, I'm like, this does not compute for me. But yeah, we have a very robust history of studying geology in our state. And a lot of the resources that you'll see today, a lot of the maps and imagery and information was generated by us. We are very important in terms of locating and understanding where oil and gas wells are. We actually have a robust earthquake program looking and understanding where earthquakes, both natural and man-made, occur. And then we have other aspects as well, like learning about where our geology comes from, the different layers of rocks, their time periods, and in our case today, aquifers. Aquifers are by far one of our most important resources here in our state. It contributes billions of dollars of economic value. It supports the livelihood of many Kansans across the state. And it is a very hot button issue. It is something that our own governor has made as one of her foremost issues of the state, ensuring that our aquifers are sustained for generations to come, and that we find ways that we can continue to use our water without depleting it at a record pace. So let's go over some basics of aquifers. And what I'm going to show you is just basically going to be the like a general overview of what aquifers are. But at the end of today's little class, and also I'll send some links as well, I'll provide you with much more in-depth resources of where you can learn more about aquifers. Whenever I talk to people about geology, it is definitely that it's like the wide pool of information. I know a lot about a little things, a lot. And so a lot of times when my colleagues come up to me, they're like, well, you know a lot. I'm like, no. I just know a lot about little things, like of many things all at once. So I'm going to, at the end of today's little lecture, I'll send you some more information where you can get much more into detail to your heart's content here. So let's get going on that presentation. Just let me know if you're not able to see this or not. I actually got the screen. Excellent. Looks like you'll be able to see it from here. So what is an aquifer? An aquifer is an underground source of water. A lot of times when they think of aquifers or underground sources of water, there's this misconception like it's this cave of water or this river that flows underground. Actually, that is far from the truth. It's actually stored in these very porous layers of rocks. A lot of rocks we think are very dense, very solid, but the layers of rocks themselves, particularly depending on the kind of rock you have, like limestone and sandstone, is actually filled with pores, very much like a sponge. And within those pores, are areas where the water can collect. So in this case, it's very basic example of an aquifer. You'll have water that will percolate slowly down from the surface over time. It will seep down further and further until it reaches some sort of impermeable layer of rock. In Kansas' case, a lot of times that can be shale. Shale is a very thick, very dense object that prevents any water from going down further. So in this case, it kind of acts like a bathtub. When you fill up that water is going to be collected, and it's what we define as a confined aquifer. And so the top of the aquifer is the water table. And so we use the wells, whether it's research or for pumping purposes, to collect that water and to use it for irrigation purposes, things like that. And so this water is spread out all across western Kansas. And so we use this water primarily for irrigational purposes, but also for other communities as well. And so in our case, we are part of the much larger High Plains Aquifer. This is spread out across 8 states, from Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, down to New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. All this yellow that you see right here is part of the High Plains Aquifer. And this is actually formed primarily by the rising Rocky Mountains. This is actually something that I like to hit on for my teachers and students, is that even though we are in the center of the US, the center of the continent, we are still affected by plate tectonics. People think plate tectonics, they think earthquakes, they think volcanoes. But in our case, when we have the rising Rocky Mountains, which is caused by plate tectonics, we have this massive amount of sediment. This sediment is being eroded off from the Rockies. It's being carried eastward into our state. It's fanning outwards. It's dumped into the western portion of the state. So we have this loose, what we call unconsolidated sediment. And because that sediment is not lithified, it hasn't been pressed together to form actual rock, it's very porous and actually is incredibly excellent in terms of making their own aquifers. So every part where you see here this yellow, a lot of it is that sediment that's dumped eastward, creating that nice, very perfect circumstances for our aquifers to form over time. And so as such, we get a little bit of a dichotomy in Kansas about where we get our water from. So as mentioned before, it supplies about several $1 billion of economic value to our state. This is something that Kansans regularly pump out of the ground to water our crops, to hydrate our animals. primarily used for irrigation, but like I said, it's very important. And about 70 to 80% of the water used by Kansans comes from this aquifer. It's very important, but even so, not everyone uses it. And so at this point, before I go any further, I want to talk very quickly about groundwater versus surface water. Groundwater, basically aquifers. It's below the surface, and it can take many, many years to accumulate over time. A lot of times when it rains, the rain will hit the ground and will pool, it'll form streams, and the streams will connect and form rivers, which will eventually, in our case, divert eastward. However, over time, some of that water can seep below ground and slowly accumulate from there. As an example, it can take several inches of, the aquifer may rise up about several inches, if not less, over many years of accumulation. Surface water, on the other hand, it's like name implies, it's on the surface. It's on the forms of rivers, reservoirs, lakes. So whenever you see Kansas River, whenever you see something manned by the Army Corps of Engineers, those are going to be the reservoirs that we primarily use for our surface water. And they have a much quicker response to precipitation changes of rain and snow compared to our groundwater. And so one thing I always like to bring up to my students is this map of precipitation across Kansas. Whenever we drive across I-70, you really get to see that difference of environment change over time. Since we're going a very nice east to west transition, we're seeing a change from a roughly 30 inches of rain or so in Kansas City. And as we travel westward, we get to about half of that once we get to the western border of the state. And so we see this really nice change in the topography, in the landscape, in the habitats, going from a eastern deciduous mixed grass environment to a tall grass prairie to a short grass prairie. And so this is very important because this eastern amount of rain, this large amount of rain, feeds into our rivers and streams of Kansas. And so when you combine the two together, the aquifers and the rain, you can get a very nice chart that, right, like seen here, that shows where does our water come from. So this chart here shows the percentage of water that we get depending on your county. If you have a light blue that dominates your pie chart, that means it is you get more of a groundwater. If you have dark blue that dominates your pie chart, that is coming primarily, you're getting your water primarily from the surface. And so we see this really nice relationship, especially since we kind of overlaid it with our aquifers here, that most of the water is going to come in from your groundwater. But on the flip side, when we go more eastward, particularly in the southeastern quadrant of the state, we're seeing a lot more of a rise in terms of getting your water from the surface. This actually leads to my first activity. So this is, I'll kind of pepper in some activities across this presentation, and this is the first one. Where do you get your water from? This is a really nice activity that I think helps gets the ball rolling and having students think about where does their water come from. It can serve as a good introductory for the middle school and high school before we jump into more intense ones in activities, and it can actually have be a great map exercise for our younger students in the elementary age. And for this activity, and I'll also show where you can get these activities on our website, you challenge students to first locate where your county is, and then think about how much rain you get if you're located on top of a prominent aquifer, and then think about, is your water primarily from the surface, primarily from the ground, or is there a mix between the two? And then have students observe the other counties to think about how where other people from across the state get their water from. So to really kind of try to unite the notion of how our water sources vary across the state using these very simple, very nicely made maps. And again, feel free to interrupt or ask questions as we go along. But from here, let's shift the gears and talk about how do we study the aquifers. So this is really cool in my opinion. So every January, KGS and the Department of Agriculture measures about 1,400 wells across the state. So this map you see here is of western Kansas, and every little green dot that you see here is a measured well. So every year we go out to every single one of these wells, usually in the span of 1 week in January, and we go out and we measure the water level of these wells. These are done every year, a lot of them from the 80s. And so we get this really nice, robust idea of how much water has changed over time. And then this map shows, it shows how much has the water dropped between 2022 to 2023. So because we have so many wells and we do it every year, we were able to create these really nice maps, kind of show off which areas of the aquifer have decreased more versus which areas have actually increased in their water table. And the process of how we measure water levels, beautifully simple, fantastically simple, but it is very amazing of how efficient it is. We have this nice little diagram that I showed you earlier. Basically, you have a scientist, you have a metallic tape, you insert the tape into the well and you just go, 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 go. You go and you unroll and you unspool and unspool and unspool until you think you hit where the aquifer level is. And then once you think you hit it, they're like, all right. And then you wind it back up and then you wind it back up. And then once you get close to the surface, you start slowing it down. And then they start looking at the metallic line itself. And then wherever that the line is wet, they mark it. They do some measurements saying like, okay, if we dropped it this amount of much and the water line's right here, they do some simple math. And that tells you how much water level has as below the surface over time. It's very amazing, but it's very efficient. And so that's why we are able to have such robust data over decades because of this simple measurement. And I actually got a nice little video here that I want to show you all. I forgot if I had turned on the sound of this, but we don't. Sound is not too necessary if you can't hear it. So here he is. This is one of our scientists. He's winding up the tape, and he's looking at the water line. And so he calls out loud the measurement of what that number is. And then they write down the number. And then from there, they know how deep the water table is. Super simple, just like that. And we do that for 1 week. We get a lot of volunteers, a lot of staff members to come out and measure it. And that is where you can actually do your own aquifer model. This is where the second activity comes in here. A lot of times, when I talk to students and I say there's this underground source of water and we're getting a lot of water from it, they're like, how can rock hold water? That makes no sense. Well, this model demonstrates that very well, because what you do, you just get a tub, you put a little tube in it, whether it's like a paper towel roll or a PVC pipe. You then fill it up with some sand. You fill it up with some sand, and then you slowly pour water into it. And when you look in from the inside, you can see where the water level is inside of the tube itself. And then what you can do is you can put a little soap pump with a little wire mesh taped in on the bottom. You insert it in, you can do a few pumps, and the water comes out just like that. And that's how wells pump the water out nowadays, through negative pressure. It sucks the water up, and we use it for that purposes. And you can do this exact same activity and measure it just like how the hydrogeologists measure their aquifer levels. You take a ruler and you put a little chalk on it, just like how they do it. You insert it into the tube, you take it out, it has the little line on there, and then you can calculate how deep below ground is the ruler, where is the ruler line at, and then that will give you an idea of where your water table is at. Then after a few pumps, you can then do another measurement to see how much more it has deepened over time. Really efficient way to help demonstrate how underground can hold water, how we can use wells to pump it out, and how we can use wells to also measure the water level as well, which is very cool. All right. So one thing that I also like to hit on with my students is that there is this inherent link between the groundwater and the surface water. And so when we look at this map on the left, it says major perennial stream changes from 1961 to 2009. Perennial means this water flows all year, every year, doesn't stop or doesn't have what we call intermittent flow. And so when we look at this, we can see that a lot of prominent perennial streams, particularly those that are over an aquifer, are basically dried up, or if they're not, they only flow every now and then. In the Kansas, I always say, gotta make sure to say Arkansas. And the Arkansas River is a great example of that. If you ever go to Dodge City, you're greeted with an incredibly dry riverbed of the Arkansas River. And that's because of pumping in the area. Because of the amount of pumping that we have done across Kansas, but also in that area of the Arkansas River, the ground acts as a super dry sponge. So rather than just having the river flow overhead and continue onwards, the super dry ground sucks it up and creates the sand bed that you see here. So even though the Arkansas River starts in Colorado, as soon as, like shortly after it enters Kansas, it dries up and doesn't resume until roughly the Great Bend area. And so one of the things that I hit on with my students is that, you know, even though if you are in Kansas City, if you're in the Topeka, Lawrence area, wherever, you know, you may think aquifers, whatever, that's a Western Kansas problem. Well, not necessarily, because if we have this incredible drainage going on here, that means the surface water, which Eastern Kansas rely on, is now suddenly at a much lower level, which means there's not as much water going around for us to benefit with. So this is an inherently linked issue that affects people all across the state. This is a great example of how this is not just a certain group of people that affect their issue. This is something that affects all of us across the state. Now, over time, we have documented how much water level has changed over time. And one thing that I want to stress that at the survey, we don't have any kind of policy making decisions or tell people how they can or can't use their water. We are just for informational purposes. We research it and provide the data for local leaders, water district managers, and legislators. And so we provide them the data for them to use to understand how much water is left and how much water we can expect to use for the near future. This is where our next activity comes in. We actually have what's called the High Plains Aquifer Atlas, and this is something that anyone can go to at any time. So I'm going to open up this link here that was on my PowerPoint, and then I want to screen share one more time. And so basically what you can do is you can go, it takes you to this website, the Kansas High Plains Aquifer Atlas. And then you can go down to the interactive atlas. And this is absolutely phenomenal. It will load up a map of all the measured wells in Kansas. So if I want to go to one that's near Garden City, and I'm just going to pick one randomly. I'm going to pick this well. And I'll click on more information. It will give you an in-depth look of how much water is left in that well or how much has decreased over time. This is based on that measured tape measurement that I showed you earlier. We added in constantly over time. And it'll give you the depth of the well, like where the bottom of the well is. And it'll give you all this exact information. So that can be another great activity. And this is, I would think, be really good for high schoolers. You go and you focus in on a particular area, on a particular county. You can then click on all these wells. You document how much water has decreased over time, and then you can create a little map that shows like which counties are more affected versus others, and give you an idea of how much water is left over time. White Woman Bottoms KGS name. How are they named? I don't know about the White Woman Bottom ones. A lot of times the wells are named after local places, people, things like that. So the naming is out of our hands there. It's usually based on the local area. Thank you for asking, though. So I'm going to stop the share one more time. And I'm going to, I know we're running a little, we only have a few more minutes left, but I want to show you a few other things that you can use to help us to learn. So, we are also looking for volunteers for our new Ogallala Aquifer board game. We actually have a master student that she and I have collaborated with to create this game. Students take on the role of farmers, and they basically pick animals or plants to raise. Each animal and plant has their own water usage that they take, and then kids can also pick technology to help them increase profits or decrease water usage. I describe this game as a cooperative game disguised as a competitive game, because in this game, everyone's collecting from the same shared water source. And so basically I tell the kids, like, you know, like the odds of the game is to get the most money, but if the aquifer becomes completely depleted before the end of the game, then everyone loses. And so this is to help instill that the aquifer isn't just your resource, it's everyone's resource. And so we are now in like testing phases. So we, like I said, we are looking for teachers, particularly in Western Kansas, who are willing to sign up and have them and their students sign some waivers to see if this kind of game is beneficial in learning for their own classes. And I should also say, you don't necessarily need to be part of the program. We made this teacher classroom friendly, where you can just print out the board, print out the information, and then you can just pass it out to your students, and they themselves can play the game as well. Okay. Is the Ogallala part of the High Plains or opposite? It is part of the High Plains. So the Ogallala Aquifer is, aquifers can be divided up into different sections. In this case, the Ogallala is part of the greater High Plains Aquifer. There were super fun cleanup sites near the wells where Bella draws its water from. How are these wells monitored, and by whom? That is a good question. I am not sure about that. But what I will say is that the Kansas Geological Survey, we have just launched our new quality well program, where we are now going across the state and not just measuring the quantity of how much water is left in your wells, but also the quality. How much pollutants or materials are inside the water of your wells. And we are now creating a new database where hopefully it will be just as robust as our quantity one, that will show you what kind of things are actually in our water. I see it's 5 o'clock. I don't want to keep you all for too much longer, but I want to end on this last thing right here, is that you can go on to our website, the Kansas Geological Survey. There you can find more resources in regards to our aquifers. There's a link section for our educational activities, which will demonstrate the education activities I showed here, but will be in document form that you can print out and try yourself. Let me know if you're unable to get it or not. Our website's been a bit buggy lately, which is kind of frustrating. But if not, I can definitely share you the resources. And I'm going to end on this one last final thing, which is we are actually, I'm very pleased to announce this, we are hosting our own Kansas Live Well Teacher Workshop. We still have some signups left, and I'm going to post a link to it on the chat here. But basically, this is a teacher workshop in Great Bend. It goes from June 2nd to June 4th. And this is an opportunity to learn about our water, both the surface and the groundwater. You'll get to learn, listen to experts who studied water for their professional career. You'll get to visit sites like the wastewater treatment plant, the Arkansas River, and learn how we collect and study water from across the state. This is a free event. We actually are going to would pay for your hotel, your food, your gas, and all this is just an opportunity for getting teachers to learn more about our water resources, what is critical and what's impacting our state. If you're not able to make it, I know it's a little bit short notice and Great Bend is pretty far out there. We are going to do another one in August in the eastern part of the state. So if you want to sign up for that one, just pay attention to our social media for Kansas Geological Survey, and we'll send updates and links to that. All right, I know it's 5:02, just went a little overboard, sorry about that. But does anyone have any last minute questions they want to ask before we sign off?
Andy, thank you so much. That's so much information, and
I know.
I'm so excited to dig in. I was like taking screenshots of things and like, this is just amazing. Such good information and so many things to dig into. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us and for all of your time with us today. We were going to pop a couple things into the chat and also on the screen really quick, and it's got your links to your resources, Andy. So I'm going to share screen really quick. Here we go. Speaking of educational opportunities, another one that we've got coming up is starting May 27th and it runs through June 20th. And this is an online course that you can take through us where it's asynchronous. You just complete this on your own time between those dates. And there is graduate credit available. So you can click here or scan the QR code either way. And then we've also got our annual conference coming up. It's coming up. Oh, that's scary. Not till November, and November 3rd and 4th. That's a ways out. That'll be in Topeka, and we're in person this year, and we've got guest speakers, we've got workshops, we've got concurrent sessions, all sorts of good things there. And then here are several links to more resources from Andy, and you can click these links or scan, and we will also pop a PDF to this in the chat. So I wanted you to have all that. And then last but not least, quick promo for next week. We have another VME coming up, and I will let Rachel share just a brief bit about that to get you some info.
Awesome. Yes. Next week we have Dave Atchison, and he's going to be talking about school gardening. So he's gardened for 60 some years now. He's done schools specifically for over 30 years. So he's going to be a really great speaker. He will actually be doing an in-person school gardening workshop June 10th in Ogden, which is near Manhattan. So if you know anybody who's interested in really like understanding school gardening more, he is literally the master. So it's going to be a really exciting event next Wednesday, 4:30 with Dave Atchison. And with that, Andy, you're a rock star.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much for your brain and
Thank
your
you.
effort. And I was thinking we have all kinds of green career pathways, and you would be phenomenal to talk to kids and the math, the science. I mean, it was really exciting. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, happy to help, happy to participate at any time.
Cool. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.